All right. Good morning, good afternoon, depending on what part of the country you are joining us from. Thank you guys so much for spending some time with us today. My name is Noah Lonnie. I work with Logic, a revenue management commercial strategy platform. We are very, very grateful that you are spending your valuable time with us, and we're going to be respectful of that. So, we're going to have a conversation about revenue management and sales combining together and give you some best practices, give you some useful tips to take away. We'll have a discussion for about 15 to 20 minutes and then go into your questions. To give you a little bit of background on where this webinar came about, Logic and STS Cloud got together. I think it was at a conference one day where we've all been talking about commercial strategy, bring the three disciplines, sales, marketing, and revenue together. How do we do that? And honestly, we all were very much the same thought where you, the hoteliers, have done such a phenomenal job of really moving forward and understanding those disciplines and crossing lines and having great communication. It's been technology. Technology has been a significant kind of pullback from you being able to implement even more commercial strategy. So from that came the revenue management side and the sales side going, how do we work together? And so as of just recently, we've fully integrated in with STS Cloud and being able to push group pricing optimizations directly into that system. We're not doing a demo today. You don't have to, we'll absolutely love to spend time showing that to you. Reach out to Mike, reach out to Rick, reach out to myself. We're happy to set up time to do that. But today's goal is to give you some insight into the philosophy of why it is we're doing what we're doing. And as I mentioned, give you some useful tips and tricks that you can implement right away at your property and start getting from quote to close as quickly as possible. So I'm here to facilitate. That should be the majority of what you hear from me today. I'm going to let Mike and Harsh introduce themselves, and then we'll go ahead and kick it off. So Mike, want to go ahead?
Nice applause feature. Thank you, everyone. Mike Pavasich, Director of Sales for STS Cloud. Really appreciate you joining us today. I hope that you walk away with some best practices. We are hoteliers. We come from your background, so we know kind of the ins and outs of what you're dealing with on a daily basis. And I think that there could be a more important topic about response time and getting group pricing out to the marketplace in the most efficient manner. So thanks again for spending a half hour with us.
So my name is Harshinder Chada. I'm the lead data scientist at Logic. I also go by Harsh. Today I'm here to talk about group pricing and come from a little bit from the data side, going a little bit about the data points that we look at, what goes into our rate optimization. And yeah, I'm looking forward to a really interesting and insightful conversation.
Just wait until they start doing the laugh tracks on us too. That'll. I'm going to go ahead and kick it off. Harsh, you just mentioned data. Data is very important. That's where our side comes from. And that's one of the pieces that we really want to make available to the sales side. So can you give a little insight as to what the different data pieces are that should be considered when we're looking at group pricing and really optimizing what that price should be?
Yeah, definitely. And I think that's a really good place to start off in terms of like what data sources go into it. So in a typical, before you go to the analysis part and like go drive deep down into the analysis of like evaluating a group, you want to look at key data points. Those data points are market data. And that's really used to get an insight into how's the market performing, how is it historically performed, and see exactly what types of customers are coming into the market. And that really goes very, very critically into the later part of the decision-making analysis process of like, okay, am I getting a lot of transient business? Like what types of transient business is coming? Is there a lot of group heavy? Is there any events going on? That really helps kind of set from a macro level of where do I need to look at in terms of when I dive down really deep into my hotel data. And that's the second piece, right? How has the hotel historically performed and what is currently on the books, right? Are we having a lot of transient business at the moment? Do we have a group business? Is that in line with the market? Is there any kind of deviations? And then the next part of it is, what are we pricing right now, right? Are we at a point in where we're in a critical high demand season, low demand season? And those are kind of like the data points you need to start off with to kind of understand, okay, how can I use this data and then going down to the process of, okay, where do I need to go with the rate recommendation? How do I need to do things like displacement analysis?
Awesome. Thank you. So I think that's such an important piece is there's both sides that we're looking at inside the hotel and outside the hotel. And not necessarily just what's on the books, but how are we pacing? Because there may not be a whole lot on the books, but we're in line with what a typical pace is, or we're in line with what the market is pacing. So don't just be fooled by there's not a whole lot on the books if we're pacing alongside of the market and we've got things like that. I think that's such an important piece to look at. And also when you mentioned where we're pricing, that willingness to pay, what are consumers willing to pay? I think we all saw some craziness happening in a lot of different markets in 2022. You could throw any price out there and people were just paying it. So making sure that we had an understanding of what that willingness to pay. That's really great. Mike, let's talk about some more of the data pieces. Is the sales team supposed to find this data? So we tell them what to get. Who should they be speaking with? Who should they be asking for this data? How do they collect that correctly?
Yeah, it's the wild west of everyone having different procedures and policies on how they quote group business. And inherently what the problem is, and in fairness, it's been a problem for a really, really long time, is that the process of getting your group rate. I'm a sales manager, a piece of lead comes in, or I'm cold calling and I find a piece of business. I want to get that quote out the door as quick as possible. Because there's a really interesting statistic in our business. If you look at just general products and services, right, it's 47% buy off of the person that gives them the quickest response. So I'm a customer, I'm shopping general services. I put out a lead to 2 or 3 different vendors. The first one to respond 40%, 47% of the time gets the purchase. In hospitality, it's 73%, right? So that's a 26% delta right there. That's a 26 favorability rating for our in hospitality, that if we get that quote out the door, that we have that greater chance of getting purchased. So going back to your question is, how do I get all that data formatted into a group rate and get that proposal out the door? And that is really where the lines of communication and being able to, whether it's through automation, whether it's able through process, how do you put the revenue team that has the data and the sales team on the same page, that when that lead comes in, they can efficiently talk to each other and get that quote out the door? I think that, it's not rocket science, right? When we talk about fast response, there's not some great psychology behind it. A no response or a slow response is a response to that customer, right? So a fast response shows that there's a care that you have in their business. And so it's really taking all that data, getting that group rate, understanding the function space, what's available, setting your F&B minimums, putting that all together and getting that proposal out the door. In an ideal world, that should happen within a couple of hours, right? If not instantaneously. The problem in our business is it's taking days. Sometimes it's taking weeks. You're waiting on a revenue director. The sales director has a business review once a week. That is too slow when 73% of your business is going to buy on the person that's responding the fastest.
So if I just heard you correctly, I think it's almost that there's 2 speed factors that we need to be looking at. It's an internal speed and then an output speed. That's it. And those are 2 almost complete buy cycles that our salespeople have to manage already.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, it's spot on. It's really the 2 buckets, right? It's the internal speed about, if I'm a sales manager, how can I get that rate and that quote internally and approved, right? You certainly don't want people just quoting random rates out there. To what Harsh was saying earlier, there's a lot of science and a lot of data that needs to go into the formation of that rate to make sure that the rate is the best rate and best piece of business for the property. And then the second is the simplicity, right? It's the external speed. It's the time that from when that lead came in the door to when that proposal went out. And again, the quicker that happens, the better chance you have at winning the business. But it's all contingent on the internal speed, right? How can we get that information? How can I get it approved and get that group rate, group function space out the door into the customer?
Yeah, and I like to piggyback off of that a little bit. When we talk about speed from like a input output, it really matters when you're coming up with a rate recommendation that you are very fast for, a few reasons. One is that when you look at the data, especially at the market level, you can see exactly what customer segments are coming in. Or is it like a really heavy transient period where this group request coming in, or is there like a lot of group business? But then also looking at the hotel level, exactly. Like typically, if you are looking at a particular demand period going forward, you'll have a good sense from the data about, okay, typically for me, this is a very low demand period, right? Getting that business is very important. And when it comes to group business, unlike transient businesses, the payoff function is basically either you get it or you don't. So getting out that quote definitely from when it comes to like formulating that rate recommendation, looking at the data piece is really critical. And I think that kind of goes into the deep diving into like what needs to be included in that proposal to get that fast response, right? From both what the customer, the prospective group is going to look for, and like trying to basically streamline that process of that back and forth into several hours.
I think you just hit on something that I think is really important is the back and forth. And we want to be able to minimize that as much as possible. And again, I'm looking at these two different sales cycles that our salespeople are having to go through. Because a lot of times the sales team is having to sell the group internally first, right? So they've got to go to their revenue manager, general manager, their director of sales, whoever it may be, and they're having to pitch the group. So how do we expedite that process? So Harsh, I'll ask you this. Talk to me about what that bundle should look like for them to come prepared for the fastest. What's the checklist that a salesperson should come to any of those individuals with to get this moving as fast as possible?
Yeah, so you want to have basically all from like the input side in terms of like what the group proposal is. So you want to get down, okay, how many room nights, obviously, and like what does that distribute over the property in terms of room types? Is it just a run of house, or they're asking for specific room? Then you want to think about ancillary revenue, the complement, the any comp rooms, commission, when you come to the analysis process of like commission percentages, all that. So you want to have that like all kind of as fast as possible to like the revenue team. And then what you want to output as is basically where like in terms of like the back and forth, you can go through, okay, I have this maybe band, like trying to understand what band of quote can I, have like in terms of what's the word? Negotiating leverage, right? And then you want to come back with also if you envision that this customer or this potential group might be interested in alternative dates, you want to have that out the door and do that right away. I think that's the alternative dates end up becoming a really critical key is like, how can I bring that in right away and have that surfaced out to the customer so they can, streamline the process of like a decision being made from the group.
That's great. And yeah, as Mike mentioned earlier on, we're former hoteliers. And so I'm very familiar. I actually did both. I did the sales side as well as the revenue side. And one of the big pieces, because of course, our dear revenue managers who have a tendency to think in spreadsheets. And I can say that because I am one of them. So one of the beautiful things that you can hand a revenue manager is a displacement analysis, right? So really, truly being able to understand what taking this group could potentially mean, and what that trade-off would be. And to your point, Harsh, having a true view of the actual revenue. So what that net is when we are backing out, what our margin is when we are backing out those comp rooms, those commissions, all of those pieces, to be able to give a true revenue view to that revenue manager, so that goal would be the revenue manager glances at it and says, looks good, go. And they're able to go now into the next sales process.
Yeah.
So, Mike, you want to expand a little bit more, especially when we're talking about the out the door aspect, that what does full proposal look like? What is a complete proposal? What should that
Yeah,
include?
yeah. And just go back a little bit with what you were just saying. I think that a lot of time, this was my biggest frustration when I was a director of sales, was we would have a piece of business. We felt very good with the piece of business, but at the property level, right, whether it be revenue, there was this delay because they wanted a couple more days or another week to see the future, right? To have that crystal ball that would at least tell us more definitively what it's going to look like in a couple days, and then if that price would still hold up based on the pace. And the good news is that, like with revenue management systems, with or however you're compounding those data, you can take these formulas and you can feel really secure in the fact that what I'm going to be pricing and what I'm offering up for the group, to Arsh's earlier point about displacement, is correct, right? And again, there may be things that are taken to, revenue teams, right, that may not be the best piece of business for the hotel, right? And the data will prove that out. The data will tell you that that is not a correct piece of business. So I do love the fact that now with technology, right, we have these systems that run the data on the revenue side. From like what we're doing with our integration, it's fantastic, right? Because now I'm able to have that data right in the system, put in the criteria of the group, and have it spit out the rate recommendation, and it's full approvals across the board. There's no back and forth. From to your question about complete proposals, the word complete, right, that is one of the most frustrating things you can get as a meeting planner, right? And I used to hear from meeting planners and group planners and, brides in the social space, is that you get a proposal that is answering some of what you want, but not fully, right? It's giving you wide ranges on rates over a certain time period. It's giving you TBDs on certain function space. It's giving you very generic responses to very direct questions that a planner had in an RFP. So it's not just important to facilitate like, hey, this is the rate, to Harsh's earlier point, these are the alternative dates, these are the rates for those alternative dates, but also the space and the functionality, that these are the rooms and this is the space that it's going to go into. Because me as a planner now, you responded quickly and you responded strongly that you have the space, these are our rates, they're firm, let's get to contract and let's move this business forward.
I like that. You brought up two things that kind of that struck me. One of them was the revenue manager who is wanting to, like, let's just see how things pick up. I think this is where it's so important for sales to be involved with revenue when it comes to forecasting. Because if we've already agreed on a forecast and a segmented forecast, and that this is how much sales is going to be contributing, and this group business that I'm bringing in fits into that model, it's coming prepared with those data points. So being able to show, look, we all agreed that this is what our forecast is going to be. This is how we're going to make our numbers. This fits. I need this business to go in. And so that was one thing you just mentioned. And then the other one on the alternate dates, I just wanted to harp on that because I think that's something that as salespeople, again, sales, when I was on hotel side, it was drilled into us, always ask, are your dates flexible? We always have to ask that, right? But sometimes the meeting planner doesn't want to go back and ask. Sometimes they don't know that they should have asked that in the first place. There is no extra charge of ink to just provide alternate dates and rates, because if they're compelling enough, all of a sudden you just made that meeting planner the hero because they're able to save their group X amount of dollars. Where in actuality, you just became the hero because you were able to fill up a specific need time period and everybody wins. So I don't think we should be afraid to be offering those dates, those alternate date recommendations, especially if it doesn't take us extra time to do it. I think that's really the key here. I'm trying not to pitch this because it's just such a cool thing to be able to offer it. It's something I wish that I had when I was hotel side. All right. So another thing that you just brought up that I'm going to circle back to is not all business is good business, but I also want to unpack not all mediocre or sometimes even questionable business is necessarily bad business, right? Because when we look at the true value of that customer, if we take this one particular group. So let's talk about doing a displacement analysis for a full value of a group. Harsh, do you want to talk a little bit about that? How should a salesperson come to revenue if we're looking at multiple different groups?
Yeah, so I think in terms of the looking at different values of groups, you want to go into have some sense of like what is the willingness to pay of any group, right? It's gonna differ between, if it's a wedding block, is it some type of business conference that's coming in, and that's going to give you some insight into okay, at least from the outset, trying to value exactly what type of business is coming in. And the second thing you want to do is when you're looking at your forecast and arriving at a displacement analysis, you really want to see exactly at a transient level, okay, if I were to accept any of these pieces of group business, where am I going to be displacing potentially my transient? It might be that you might be getting group business where, in the ideal sense, you don't have to displace anything and it's just all pure incremental revenue. So that really helps out the bottom line. But in the cases when we do need to displace, we need to really understand exactly, okay, what are the transient segments that we project to at least displace? Where do we need to close off potentially rates and then close off that in terms of businesses from certain channels in terms of transient business, and then look at exactly, okay, if I were to input all these different groups and all their different run of house, it might be that, you might not want to displace or take a bigger group request. You might want to take a smaller group request because you have enough transient demand that's really high, a higher willingness to pay. And that's where you really want to gauge like a willingness to pay of the group from the data.
That's great. And Mike, you want anything else to add in that?
Yeah, I think I went into a hotel once, and when I took over, they were 180% to goal on their group rooms. Right, so they monitor by very kind of not revenue. They looked at just rooms, right? And to that, if you say that number out loud, you're 3 months out from the end of the year, you're up 180% to goal on your group rooms budget, right? You should be celebrated. When we reverse engineered that and we looked at the business that was put on the books and we looked at the transient we displaced, we looked at the corporate negotiated we displaced, we looked at the rate that we could have got on some of these groups, especially repeat groups that we were just grandfathering their rate in for years, while they were 180% up to rooms budget, the actual loss was in the hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I think that's what's really interesting is because listen, at the end of the day, right? I come from the sales side. Nolani, you started on you were the revenue side, morphed into the light side, the sales side, right? But salespeople inherently we have goals to make, right? On properties, we are very focused on goals. But those goals don't always mean that's the best business for the property. And that's where the alignment of revenue and sales is so critical, that you're both playing for what is best, not just for an individual, but for the property, right? And the success of that property going forward.
That's really huge. We've gone a little bit over when we said that we would talk to. I haven't seen any questions in the chat though. I know we're having some speaker issues. We'll send out the recording of this to everybody afterwards. So if you are having issues and you're not able to hear very well, I promise we'll send this over to you. And we do appreciate you spending the time here. One just kind of story that I have piggybacking off of you, Mike. I had some groups. I had a group that wanted to come in. I was in Washington, D.C., and it's a group that could only pay per diem, and they wanted to come in during the high peak time period. And so what we needed to do was immediately, this was an opportunity for us to secure business throughout multiple different need times at that per diem, which was actually in DC, the government per diem is actually pretty healthy. So we were able to do that. And so looking at that total value of the group and looking with our revenue team and going, all right, if we have to eat it for this many rooms for this time period, but we're able to guarantee a price point that's actually higher than what we're expecting over this time period when it's a lot softer, and we're going to be able to, our total displacement actually ends up being like nothing. then fantastic. But the idea is, as salespeople, that's what we need to come to the table with is, all right, if they're wanting something that we can't do right now, how do we sweeten it? How do we shift and alter what that overall displacement is by adding additional groups, adding additional revenue in other places, and really being able to feed the budget overall. All right. So I've got one question here is, where can I find these reports in FTS? So displacement and things along those lines are actually part of the STS and Logic integration. So Anne, I can let Mike know. He can see your question as well. We can set up and show you and what that looks like, how it is that we work. I think an important thing to note is we are able to work, if you're already working with a revenue management system and you love your revenue management system, perfect, stay with them. We're not going to be interfering in any way. If you're with a brand, we're not going to be interfering. If you're not working with a revenue management system, that's fine as well. So while we do have a full RMS, this is something that we are specifically doing with sales and catering, with STS, and being able to drive this specific part of business for you guys. So just as an FYI, that is available for you. All right. Any other questions, guys? So where can we pull the data in STS? Okay, so Lori and Anne. So we'll get with both of you guys and make sure that we get some of this information over to you. Okay. Yes, we'll set up a demo. Absolutely. All right. Of course. Guys, I really appreciate it. I know your time is valuable. As we promised, we are going to keep it to 30 minutes or fewer. So I will give you your 3 minutes back. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to any of us. We will send out this recording as well. And we appreciate you. Have a great one.